Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Kyungho, and I'm delighted and very much honored to take the role of the master of the ceremony for celebrating the launch of the inaugural issue of the International Journal for Documentary Heritage. Excuse me. As you know, the UNESCO has been endeavoring to promote the spirit of preserving documentary heritage and enhancing the awareness, public awareness on the significance of the documents during the past 30 plus years. And now we have more than 500 inscriptions to memory of the world from every corner of the world as of this year. So the inauguration of this journal is quite timely, and I think it would contribute to gaining momentum for its next stage of development. And I think it is quite worth to celebrate the rollout, the first issue of the journal. This journal, as you know, is published by the International Center for Documentary Heritage, which is the UNESCO Category 2 center uh, established, located in Cheongju City of Republic of Korea. Today's ceremony consists of several different sessions. First, we have for the opening, we will have some video messages from distinguished guests and followed by the remark by editor-in-chief of the International Journal of um, Documentary Heritage. In the second half of the ceremony, we'll have I'm sorry, didn't you hear? In the second part of the ceremony, we'll have presentations by three authors who contributed research papers for the first inaugural issue of the International Journal of the Documentary Heritage. Now, let's have the congratulatory remark first from Dr. Jelassi, who is working as the Assistant Director General of UNESCO for Communication and Information Sector.
Distinguished partners, esteemed participants, it is with great excitement and a deep sense of purpose that I join you today to mark the official launch of the International Journal of Documentary Heritage. This journal is more than a publication. It is a powerful new tool to protect, study, and celebrate humanity's collective memory. I would like to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Jan Bos, Chairman of the International Advisory Committee of the UNESCO Memory of the World Program and Editor-in-Chief of this journal. I would like also to thank Dr. Yoonmyoung Cho, Secretary General of the International Center for Documentary Heritage under the auspices of UNESCO in Cheongju, Republic of Korea. My thanks also go to leading this initiative with such commitment and vision. I also extend my deep appreciation to Professor Kyungho, Chair of the Memory of the World Committee of the Republic of Korea, along with the authors, editors, and all those who have contributed to this inaugural volume. We are especially pleased to launch this journal today, on May 21st, on the occasion of the World Day for Cultural Diversity, for Dialogue and Development, a date that perfectly reflects the spirit and purpose of this initiative. Documentary heritage connects us across cultures, generations, and histories. It reminds us of who we are and where we come from. And it offers us a foundation for peace, dialogue, and mutual understanding. As Maya Angelou once said, the more you know of your history, the more liberated you are. This journal serves precisely that purpose: to deepen our knowledge, to strengthen our bonds, and to empower future generations through the preservation of memory. Since the launch in 1992 of the UNESCO Memory of the World Program, we have worked tirelessly to preserve this invaluable heritage. The 2015 UNESCO recommendation on the preservation of and access to documentary heritage, including in digital form, has further reinforced this mission. Today, in a rapidly evolving digital world, our collective action is more urgent than ever. Challenges are still persisting. 60% of heritage institutions face chronic underfunding, and 80% of audiovisual materials are at risk of permanent loss. Climate change, disasters, and conflicts continue to threaten irreplaceable collections. This journal is a response to these challenges. It provides a vital space for researchers, practitioners, and policymakers to exchange knowledge and shape solutions together. In this regard, UNESCO stands ready to disseminate the journal within its network of memory institutions, national and regional committees, as well as partner governmental and non-governmental organizations in the field of documentary heritage. May this journal inspire curiosity, action, and collaboration so that our documentary heritage is preserved not just for us, but for generations to come. Thank you, and congratulations again on this important milestone.
Now, you have watched the video message from Dr. Jelassi, the Assistant Director General of UNESCO for Communication and Information Sector. My gratitude is extended to Dr. Jelassi for his congratulatory word. Next, we have the message from the Secretary General of the International Center for Documentary Heritage, Dr. Joep. Please.
Dear colleagues and friends of documentary heritage, as a Secretary General of the International Center for Documentary Heritage, ICDH, I am honored to be announced the launch of the International Journal of Documentary Heritage, IJODH. This journal offers unique window to explore the rich tapestry of our global documentary heritage. I believe IJODH can contribute to the ongoing development and impact of UNESCO's Memory of the World program. The analysis and interpretation of the world of documentary heritage will give profound insight, expanding our understanding of a different culture. In documentary heritage, countless stories and individual invaluable knowledges are contained. IJODH aims to be a catalyst for these discoveries. I extend a congratulations on the launch and express my deep gratitude to the author of the first volume and the committee editorial board members. I sincerely hope that IJODH will serve as a dynamic platform enriching dialogue on various aspects of documentary heritage. I ask all participants here today to be a part of the exciting journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Joe, for your wording. Next, let me invite Dr. Jan Bos, who is currently the chair of the International Advisory Committee of Memory of the World Program, and also working as the editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Documentary Heritage. Now, the inaugural issue of which we are celebrating now. Mr. Bos, would you please take the floor, please?
No, thank you very much, Kyungho, for your very kind introduction and for being our ceremonial master this afternoon. A warm welcome from my side to everyone at this joyful and important event. The launch of a new journal is certainly something to celebrate, and I'm very glad that so many people are joining us today. It demonstrates the need for this International Journal of Documentary Heritage. But before saying something more about that, I first want to thank UNESCO Assistant Director General Dr. Tawfik Jelassi for his warm and supportive words. The role of UNESCO in the safeguarding and awareness raising of documentary heritage cannot be underestimated. And I want to express my gratitude to Dr. Yoonmyoung, the Secretary General of IJODH, of the International Center for Documentary Heritage, ICDH, for his congratulatory words. And the congratulations can and should be returned immediately, because ICDH is the publisher of the journal. Without ICDH, there would be no International Journal of Documentary Heritage. It's as simple as that. And their institutional, personal, and moral support is invaluable. And I'd also like to acknowledge here the role of DocuHood, consultancy agency for academic journals, which takes care of the IJODH platform and many other things. In particular, during the initial phase of a new electronic journal, it's very pleasant to be supported by an experienced organization. And I certainly want to welcome here all 14 members of the editorial committee of IJODH. Their knowledge and experience in the field of documentary heritage and academic publishing has been vital and indispensable for bringing the idea of an international journal to an actual publication. I'm not going to name them all, you can find their names on the platform, but I'd like to stress the international composition of the editorial committee, with its members from Australia to Barbados, from Senegal to Japan, and from Germany to Kazakhstan. And certainly, last but not least, it's my great pleasure to know that many of the authors and peer reviewers of the first volume of IJODH are joining us at this festive launch of the journal. No journal without authors. And for them, the same goes as for the editorial committee members. They come from all over the world. In this first volume, we published papers by authors from China, Latvia, South Korea, the Netherlands, Australia, Lithuania. And of course, they wrote on very different subjects and on very different types of documents. In a few minutes, you will hear 3 of them sharing their ongoing research and thoughts with you. And speaking of different types of documents, I've always been fascinated by the enormous variety of documentary heritage. So please allow me to share a short personal anecdote. My parents did not have many books, but one they did have was a voluminous Deutsche Literaturgeschichte, German literary history. It was very thick and had an ornamented binding, which made it different from all other books in the house. But the most special thing was that it was illustrated with images and even facsimile pages of famous books. And one of these facsimiles was a page of the Codex Argentius, an illuminated 16th century manuscript of the Christian Bible in the Gothic language. It's kept in Uppsala, Sweden, and it's on the International Register. But as a child, I could not believe that such a book could exist. The pages were not white but purple, and the letters were in silver and gold. And I could read some of these letters, but others were really different from the ones I learned at school. And when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, I used to take this German literary history book from the shelf quite regularly, and then look for this purple page with these strange but beautiful characters, just to make sure that I had not dreamt about it, but that it was really there. And later on in my studies and professional career, I have had the privilege and the fortune to see many very special books, special documents, books, manuscripts, maps, archives, pictures. And many of them I can't read, but still they are fascinating because of the stories they tell and the stories that can be told about them. That's why I like to reiterate the well-known vision of the Memory of the World program. The world's documentary heritage belongs to all, should be fully preserved and protected for all, and should be permanently accessible to all. And it's from that same vision that the initiative for IJODH originated. IJODH claims to enhance global understanding of documentary heritage by stimulating academic discourse and promoting best practices across related fields, as you will have read in the announcement of this event. But was there really a need for a new international academic journal specifically on documentary heritage? Let me draw a parallel with the 1990s, when the Memory of the World program was initiated. This was short after the ending of the Cold War, when there was a rise of democratic movements across different parts of the globe. There was a growing awareness of the perilous state of documentary heritage in many countries, caused by war and social upheaval, as well as by severe lack of resources or neglect. The need was deeply felt for a global strategy to ensure the long-term protection of documentary heritage, for its historic and evidentiary value, as well as for research and educational purposes. It was also felt that documentary heritage, by its nature, differs from the natural and cultural heritage within the World Heritage Convention. Documents are enormously powerful. They spread knowledge and news, they spread ideas and opinions. They are testimonies to the past, whatever the past looked like. And they are inspirational for the thinking and behavior of people in the present and the future, and for the creation of new documents. Creators of documents have been awarded with the highest prizes in the fields of politics, science, literature. Meanwhile, other people have paid with their lives for writing, publishing, selling, or possessing certain documents. And powerful as they are, documents are at the same time extremely vulnerable. They suffer from internal decay, from pests and mold, from air pollution and climate change. And documents also suffer very easily from intentional man-made destruction. From early times on, texts have been manipulated and pictures photoshopped. Books and manuscripts have been burned, archives destroyed, and libraries have been bombed. Complete collections were demolished during and after civil and international wars. After all, the most radical way to shatter a culture, to tear down the past and to change history is by erasing or destroying all related documents. On the 25th of August 1992, when the talks for establishing the Memory of the World program had already started, the beautiful National and University Library of Sarajevo was intentionally set on fire. It burned down almost completely, together with 1.4 million precious books, maps, manuscripts, and other publications. That was the final impetus for a separate program for the safeguarding of documentary heritage for many of the world. Back to the present, to 2025. The geopolitical situation has changed again, and not only for the better. In some respects, the position of documentary heritage seems to have become even more precarious. Books on diversity, equity, and inclusion are being banned from many public libraries and school libraries in the United States. And the Librarian of Congress, Dr. Carla Hayden, a woman of color and director of the largest library in the world, has been dismissed for no other reason than doing an excellent job making all available knowledge accessible to all Americans. And in the Middle East, Israel is not only violently occupying Palestine territory in Gaza and on the West Bank, it's also confiscating Palestine book collections and other documents. I can recommend the movie The Great Book Robbery by Benny Brunner on YouTube. And in Ukraine, many hundreds of libraries have been destroyed or damaged by Russian bombs. And in libraries in the occupied Donbas areas, Ukrainian collections have been destroyed and sometimes replaced by Russian books. So, in 2025, the need for special attention for documentary heritage is still as important as it was in 1992. It is appropriate to launch a journal like IJODH. But of course, not only to tell negative stories or to point at documentary heritage destroyed or at risk. Apart from all the traditional research on interesting collections, on influential or beautiful documents, on unexpected findings, on developments in writing and reading, on reception, on publishing, on international cooperation, there are new technologies and new technological and social developments in the field of documentary heritage that create very promising opportunities for further research. More and more documentary heritage is becoming available for everyone, including academics, of course, thanks to automation, digitization, and open access. Linked data programs show great research options. Artificial intelligence offers both challenges and opportunities. Sometimes I wonder if a document created by AI, is that still a human document? IJODH strives to be a perfect platform for discussions on these subjects, and I look forward to contributions in this field. I also look forward to more articles on the often lesser known documentary heritage from regions like Africa, Latin America, and the Arab states. Within Memory of the World, there's much more documentary heritage activity in these regions, and I hope to see that reflected in the upcoming volumes of IJODH. And maybe already this year, to stimulate such contributions, we have extended the deadline for abstracts for Volume 2 to the 1st of June, and we will be somewhat flexible in that respect. And regarding the content of IJODH, potential authors may submit academic and research papers and reviews, practical studies, policy briefs, presentation papers, books or exhibition reviews. There's something for everyone. I'd like to use the opportunity to say that we also welcome peer reviewers. Their work is indispensable to keep up the high standard that we want. Today is the World Day for Cultural Diversity for Dialogue and Development. The editors of IJODH will do everything they can to use the journal to create awareness of the richness and significance of cultural diversity by promoting scholarly dialogue and the development of knowledge on documentary heritage. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jan Bos. for your brief narrative but very inspiring history of the Memory of the World program, as well as the challenges we are now facing in the year of 2025. Okay, this brings to the end of the opening ceremony for this event. And next, we'll enter to the second part of the meeting, in which we have three uh, three persons who are going to present their research papers. First, let me invite Dr. Leerssen. Did I pronounce your name correctly, sir? If I didn't, please allow or accept my apology. From University of Amsterdam, uh, who is going to present his paper titled "Culture in a Moving Rearview Mirror." Okay, Professor Leerssen, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a real privilege for me to be in such a truly global company. I hope you can all hear me properly. It's wonderful to be sharing this moment across so many different time zones. I will immediately cut to the chase, and I'm going to try and share a little PowerPoint with you, because nice as it is to see all the faces from all over the world smiling at each other, it might be slightly easier if I support my talk with a little visual aid. So here it goes. Please tell me if you are not seeing my PowerPoint properly. Is anything coming through here? Yeah, here it is. Share. Now, I trust culture in a moving rear view mirror. I address you as a historian. We have heard from the statement so far how very, very important documentary heritage is for collective memories, for the memory of the world, for our connectedness to our past and to each other. I, as a historian, am very happy to see how the fields of memory and history are now moving towards an integration. It used to be that archives and heritage institutions were seen as passive working grounds to extract information from for the historians. What we see now is a type of emancipation, that these heritage institutions are speaking to the public directly and fulfilling their own pedagogical, social, and intellectual task. I think that is a very, very wholesome development, and to have this journal consolidates that. And I'm proud as a historian to have been invited to this endeavor. At the same time, as a historian, I think hard and with some concern about memories. Memories do not only unite us, they also divide us. Memories do not only include us, they also exclude others. Memories are not just there to make us proud. Particularly as a European, I realize that memories should sometimes also make us humble. And nowadays, in this day of fake news, there is also a great problem of false memories. So how to deal with memories is important, and there the historian has only one sure guide to help them, and that is documentation, the documentary heritage. So what I would like to summarize from my contribution to the first issue is some reflections on those memories and those heritages which we consider important. And the word for that is a canon. Now, for the nonce, I define a canon as a selected heritage corpus which enjoys long-term prestige and whose importance is regularly being reasserted. And for the historian, this immediately raises interesting, intriguing questions. How long-term precisely? Do we talk about decades, centuries? Was it the same 400 years ago as it was in the last 20 years? Do these things need to be revised? Are they subject to attrition? What are the rise and fall dynamics of canonicity? And what is this reassertion? How do people reassert the importance of their canonical memories and heritage? They can do so by means of ritual, repeated reenactment, education, teaching things in school, adaptations, commemorations, monuments in public space. But it would be important to see how this praxis, this activity, works. Now, in addressing those questions, we realize that a canon leaves a trace as documentary heritage at two different levels. It works at multiple levels at the same time. To begin with, documentary heritage tells us what the canon is and how it has changed perhaps over time. And secondly, it documents what people do with it. It documents how people have made use of the canon, how they have engaged with it, what they do now in their own day and age to bring the past to life and to assert the presence of the past in their daily lives. To give you an idea of how this works, an example of commemorative statues in my own country, in Holland. What I've done in a project earlier on was to look when these statues were put up. You see them now in the street. You cycle past them, or you take the bus past, and they're just there. You hardly notice them anymore. They're a bit like lampposts or bus stops. You know, after a while you stop seeing them. They're part of the background noise. But they were all put there at a certain moment. And my question as a historian was, when were they put up? And you see that there was a big burgeoning moment around the end of the 19th century. And I thought it was very intriguing that this was precisely the time when Holland was at its most nationalistic and when it was a colonial empire, celebrating in a triumphalist way its expansion over South Asia and the Caribbean area in the 17th century as a world colonial power. And precisely those statues that were put up then are now being taken down again or problematized by people who are beginning to worry about this colonial heritage in the Netherlands. So I was thinking maybe what we're worried about is not just what went on in the 17th century when Holland became a colonial empire, but also what went on around 1880, 1900, when Holland was really triumphalist, social Darwinist, racist, and imperialist. And we're recoiling from that. So we have a twofold level of historicity, and you can fine-grain that even more. If you look at the statues that were put up, you can see that some of them are for medieval persons, like Erasmus. Some of them are for people from the early modern period, like the painter Rembrandt, and some of them are for people from post-Napoleonic times. And you can see that the popularity of certain periods has its rise and fall over the productivity of all those statues. Now, that is a way for a historian to get a more fine-grained idea of how memories and heritage relate to social praxis and commemoration. Now, for the journal, I decided to approach this question as a literary historian. How does documentary heritage speak to literary history? Because literature itself, books, as Jan was saying, is a form of heritage. And it too has that double historicity. Books are being produced, they're being read, and at the same time people are teaching them, people are turning them into operas, people are turning them into comic books, people are turning them into movies. Some books become old-fashioned, others are rediscovered, so there is a very interesting documentary heritage approach to this. This coincides with new trends in literary history. Reception history, how books are read long-term over successive readerships. How did our grandparents differ in reading books from 200 years ago from the way we do it? Maybe we are more woke than they were. We are more aware of gender relations than they were. I don't know. But this is an interesting question. How does the changing of books the reading of books change over time? We also start reading at a distance. We look at large-scale and long-term patterns exemplified by the metadata of books, not by their contents. And this leads us to book history. A book is a thing is being produced by certain technologies, sometimes handwritten, sometimes printed in movable types or in stereotypes, sometimes digitally, and all these modes of production affect the way texts are broadcast through society. How are books kept and distributed? How do bookshops work? How do online bookshops like Amazon change what people read? What is the situation of libraries? So all these lead literary historians to start looking at documentary heritage. And what I wanted to do was looking at a literary canon and look at the rise and fall of canonicity and the reassertions. And the best place to look for that was in a national library. Libraries are global and very ancient institutions, and they are repositories, not only of our memories, but of our practice of remembrancing, of commemorating, the active way of looking in the rearview mirror as the rearview mirror moves along through the successive generations. So my image was that of you drive in a car, you look in the rearview mirror, you see what's behind you, but the car is moving forward, and the image in the rearview mirror is changing all the time. And this was my symbol almost for the changing literary canon. So I did a test case to operationalize this question. With the help of Jan Bos and his colleagues, got access to all publications in the Royal Library of the Netherlands. After some tweaking of the questions, selected 21 canonical celebrities in Dutch history, like Rembrandt and Erasmus and people like that. We found that there were 16,000 catalogue records being linked to those names. And then the question was, like those statues that I did, what was there from what periods and what popularity curves that these figures have? This is a screenshot of the type of database we use to ingest the entire catalogue of the Royal Library of the Netherlands. We did some statistical and visualization operations on it. And the result is online. You can access the result of it interactively at the laboratory site of the Koninklijke Bibliotheek, the KB, the Royal Library, and also in my article for the International Journal of Documentary History. So I'm going to not say much more than this because I don't want to take up too much time, but I'll give you 3 patterns and a takeaway. Here is a pattern for medieval authors. What we found was, and we did the same thing as with those statues, that production of books on the whole drastically increases, of course, after 1800, and then again after 1920. You see the bar charts rise very, very steeply towards the right, and the graphs represent medieval canonical figures. You see that they are overrepresented in the early portions of the library, so the graphs rise above the bar chart. They decline in the course of the 17th century, and then around 1780 there's an upward tipping point which peaks in 1900. Again, we can trace the rise of Dutch nationalism in the 19th century, in the acquisitions policy and in the cultural memories of Holland in the 19th century. And then after 1900, in the 20th century, medieval interest declines, and the line graphs dip under the bar graphs, and medieval celebrities are underrepresented after 1940. Only Erasmus maintains a certain celebrity. For Romantic authors, the image is slightly different. Of course, they are very dominant and highly overrepresented in the period when they were active and when they influenced Dutch culture in the 1820s to the 1850s. After 1850, they went into a very, very steep decline, and they're totally underrepresented since 1890. And nowadays, they're totally forgotten, and the Dutch have this stereotypical self-image that we are not romantic. And it becomes a bit of a shock to think that, hey, in 1840, we were as romantic as anybody in the rest of the world. So it's also a bit of a way of shaking ourselves out of our present-day self-images and self-stereotypes. Perhaps the most important finding was that there are 3 separate indicators of canonicity. What makes a canon? We found when we analyzed the figures that there were 3 forces at work which interacted. To begin with, the canon is usually discussed as a thing among educationalists and literary critics, the professionals. And they field certain names to which they give professional importance, and their voice counts for much in the public sphere. But as a matter of fact, in the figures, their canon does not count for much at all. So in society at large, what counts much more is the presence in cultural production and reception. What books are reprinted, what books are turned into television shows, what books are discussed, what books get traction, as the saying goes. Then finally, there is an ambient presence, which is the brand name celebrity. And that is just what you might call a zombie state, in which street names and statues in public spaces and portraits on banknotes and the names of clinics and parks perpetuate the recognizability of a famous ancestral figure. But people do not necessarily look at the paintings or the statues or they read the books. They're just famous for being famous, as the saying goes. And the interesting thing is that this inert brand name celebrity is a very, very conservative force. Nowadays, the Dutch canon is making room for very important new authors like Anne Frank, for instance, possibly the most important Dutch author of the 20th century with her wartime diary, or André de Kom, a very, very powerful writer from Suriname who wrote a searing denunciation of the slavery in Suriname that was not abolished until 1860, one of the most important anti-colonial books in the language. It gets a lot of traction, but at the same time, these names are swamped out by the inert conservative forces of brand name celebrity. There is an interesting lesson for us in all this. The approach of documentary heritage, this is my experience, clarifies the relationship and the very complex relationship between history, memory, and the presence in society. These three elements stand in a dynamic relationship, in a triangular relationship that keeps on shifting. It clarifies the fine-grained complexity of canonicity and allows us much more focused discussions for public policies about education and about how we would like to have conversations about our collective identity. With that, I stop sharing and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Leerssen, for your excellent presentation. And I find that your perspective does resonate with some of the scholars who are looking back the traditional Renaissance period in which the evaluation of classics differs from period to another. There was a book published last year titled Written in Waters that deals with the idea of classics differs from 17th through 19th century. I think your perspective is just in alliance with such an endeavor to look again and try to find out some neglected aspect in the past. I think it was fascinating presentation. Thank you very much, sir. Next, I'd like to invite Ms. Chris James from Pacific Manuscript Bureau of Australian National University. Ms. James, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you to our hosts and to everyone for joining this really exciting occasion. I too actually have some slides, so I will just put them up before I get started. Great. So I'm honoured to be speaking to you all tonight from the Australian National University in Canberra on the unceded lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people who have been the keepers of stories and knowledge on this land for many generations. I'm mindful of time, but I do want to take a moment to thank all the archivists, librarians, and museum workers right across the Pacific who have shared their sort of professional stories with me over the last decade or so, and this is what has compelled me to write the paper that was included in the journal. I realize I am an outsider talking about the Pacific, but these are my observations and my concern for documentary heritage in the region. I also want to stress that this paper is not to in any way criticize anyone working with documentary heritage in the Pacific or those making decisions about how funding is allocated. I understand these are institutions that were established out of colonial and decolonial processes, and there is excellent work being done right across the region. But this is a paper to advocate for greater support and investment in the archive sector in the Pacific at every level, so that Pacific Islanders can care for their documentary heritage as fully trained archives professionals with the resources they need to manage the threats to their collections and to grow their resources for providing this really important public service to their communities. In the past sort of 150 years or so, these islands have seen massive changes through missionization, colonization, war, capitalism, and globalization. These have all drastically reshaped their communities. So the documentary heritage of these places hold information that's really important to them. Information about land transfers, lost languages and traditions, genealogies, climate adaptation, and they present opportunities as well for new narratives to be told. The archives of the post-independence Pacific should also hold their health data, their government spending, their international agreements, information that impacts their lives and their futures. Yet few archivists in the Pacific are actually given all the tools they need to manage this. I also want to stress that I'm speaking very much in generalizations here. The Pacific is a very diverse place, but I'm speaking in generalizations. And again, to acknowledge the really good work that our colleagues around the region are doing, and doing without all the tools that they need. So the article is titled The Ongoing Need for the Pacific Manuscripts Bureau. So I should start with what is the Pacific Manuscripts Bureau? So I'm the executive officer of the Pacific Manuscripts Bureau, or PAMBU, as we are more commonly known. We're a small preservation copying project based at the Australian National University. The Bureau was established here back in 1968 in partnership with 4 other libraries to identify, catalogue, and make copies of collections of Pacific documentary heritage. We prioritise materials that are at risk of loss or destruction, or materials that are difficult to access because of their remote locations, or they might be private collections. So we actually travel 2 collections with portable copying equipment so that we don't need to move records from their island homes. And then the collection that we manage is one of surrogate records. We've always had twin aims of preservation and access. So the preservation copies that we make are made accessible to researchers through our network of sponsoring libraries. And these libraries fully fund the work that we do. Collection custodians can set access conditions, which we and our library network comply with. So our collections are very broad. They range from mission records to volcanological data, whaling logs to forestry reports, colonial records to personal records like diaries and photographs. And these are just a few shots just to give you a taste of the sorts of materials that we have copied and hold copies of. We're a very small organisation. We have a team of just under 1.5 full-time equivalent staff. And I should also stress that these are my opinions, my observations, and not necessarily those of my broader funding institutions. So my paper essentially made the case that nearly 60 years on from the establishment of the Bureau, there is still a need for the work that we do. I've argued this because the old threats to archives remain, but there are also new challenges to manage, some of which have already been mentioned by previous speakers. I'm aware, though, that PAMBU isn't isn't the answer to these problems. We're just a small service providing sort of basic, important but basic first aid to some collections in need. We need large-scale systemic change and long-term supportive relationships to manage, to improve circumstances. So I wanted to look first at the threats or risks to archives, and I've divided these up into active, passive, and digital, and I'll explain a bit more about that now. So when we think of tropical climates, we very rightly think of environmental risks to archives. We think of humidity, extreme weather events like floods and cyclones, or natural disasters like earthquakes and volcanoes. And these are all very real threats in the Pacific, and we need to protect documentary heritage against these threats. A lot of them are managed reasonably well. A lot of these are everyday life for archivists in the Pacific. But there are many challenges, and they're growing. As we start to see our climate changing, environmental threats become more difficult to respond to. For example, in just a few short years, Vanuatu was hit by the cyclone. It then felt the economic impacts of the pandemic. Then it was hit by 2 more cyclones in quick succession, and then an earthquake. So while the archives and library only suffered minimal physical damage in these events, the economy and people's resilience was impacted. And this all takes away from the opportunities to invest more in institutions like archives and libraries. They sort of become less of a priority. And I saw this, I spent some time in the Mariana Islands last year, and I saw this as well, not getting the opportunity to recover from one sort of disaster before another one comes along. And climate change also presents new threats. An example of this is the wildfires on the Hawaiian island of Maui that in 2023 destroyed much of the town of Lahaina, including its library and heritage buildings. We don't typically think of wildfires being a threat on tropical islands, but here we are. I think Lahaina is an interesting case study on the sort of the impact and the intersections of colonialism, capitalism, and climate change. But I'm mindful of time, so I won't go into it anymore. You'll have to refer to the article for more of my thoughts on Lahaina and its significance. I spent a lot more time than I expected writing this article to writing about fire. So when I was making an assessment of how many collections we've copied that are now the only extant copies, I realized that a lot of those collections have been destroyed or at least threatened by fire of some kind. Some examples: the Papua New Guinea National Fisheries College Library burned down in 2010 due to an electrical fault. Thankfully, we had microfilmed a large portion of the original materials they held in the library, and we've been able to assist them to rebuild that collection. Arson was responsible for burning down the Supreme Court of Vanuatu in 2007. Again, Pambu had already microfilmed some of these documents, but many more of them were lost. I also want to talk about the threat to documentary heritage from civil unrest. The most recent example of this is in the French territory of New Caledonia, where civil unrest led to really deadly and destructive riots in response to changes in the French Parliament, which many felt extinguished the possibility of independence for New Caledonia. In this conflict, heritage sites were targeted with the burning of a Leerssen Catholic church and the desecration of the memorial to a Kanak chief. A few months prior to the riots, I had been working in Noumea with a collection of photographs that I believe to be the most extensive and representative collection of life in the Pacific post-World War II. It's already a vulnerable collection from budget cuts, risk of king tides. And so sitting in Australia watching cars and buildings burn all across Noumea made me really worry about the safety of that collection. And because of those riots, digitization work in the collection has been forced to pause, unfortunately, since then. Other examples: in Papua New Guinea, anti-government riots on 2 university campuses saw the destruction of buildings which housed a significant rare book collection and an ethnobotany collection. In the Solomon Islands, during the ethnic tensions, a major plantation office was burned down, destroying their archive, which thankfully Pambu had already microfilmed. And for a time, the National Archives repository was occupied by a militia. During the 1987 coup in Fiji, the Fiji Trades Union Congress building was firebombed and their archive was put at great risk. Again, Pambu was able to microfilm that collection after the risk had passed. So Pambu has been able to help out in a number of situations, but obviously that's not always the case. I also want to talk about less dramatic threats to archives. I've characterized these as passive, but with a little bit of hindsight, I think I've overlooked the fact that many decisions have been made over many years by many people not to increase funding to libraries and archives, not to give grant funding or aid to heritage institutions, not to prioritize libraries in internal budgets. I'm not managing these budgets, so I'm not casting judgment on these decisions. I know difficult decisions need to be made, but I do think we need to acknowledge the insidious and cumulative impact of long-term underinvestment. Another major challenge faced by archivists in the Pacific is a lack of access to formal tertiary training in archival practice. The University of Papua New Guinea teaches some archival subjects as part of a communications degree, but that's it. If you want to get formal archives training in the Pacific, you need to look further afield. You likely need to travel to a country further away. These fees are often very expensive. Scholarships in the field of archives aren't always prioritized. So this can make it really difficult for people in the region to get formal archives training. And so our colleagues in the Pacific are denied the same opportunities to be degree qualified professionals with confidence in the work that they're doing. And I think this also feeds a narrative that these institutions aren't important. This isn't important as a profession. Ongoing professional development is also very difficult. There is rarely in-country professional development opportunities for archivists. Online opportunities are improving, but this is not always an option. For example, a national archive that I visited recently doesn't have internet access at all, and data is very expensive. So those online opportunities are not an option for people there. In terms of government archives, these really should be driven by legislation. And in some places, legislation followed many years after decolonization, and it isn't always up to date, which is probably true in Australia as well. For example, a lot of them will not include digital records. So when legislation is non-existent or it's out of date, it can leave archive staff without clear direction about their work. And I would also argue that this cumulative underinvestment in archives and libraries can make it difficult for them to fulfill the requirements of the legislation. How do you care for records and make them publicly accessible when decades worth of transfers are sitting in shipping containers, when there is no published catalogue, no digital resources to assist people in the remote parts of your jurisdiction to access public information? It makes it difficult then for archival institutions to prove their worth and their purpose when they don't have the tools that they need. And so it sort of becomes a cycle. Next, I want to talk about risks associated with digital archives. So many archival institutions in the Pacific don't have the resources they need to fully manage their physical collection. And digital presents, yes, excellent new opportunities, but it can also add to the challenges and compound existing challenges. Very few institutions that I'm familiar with in the region have the storage capacity for long-term storage of digital collections. Instead, there's a reliance on short-term media such as USBs and optical discs. Very few institutions that I'm familiar with have digital databases or digital asset management systems. And I know of too many database projects that have fallen over after a few years because there hasn't been any IT support in place. Short-term grants often mean there isn't ongoing funding for things like renewing licenses, for software upgrades, for new threats from things like bots that site. When digitization equipment breaks, access to repairs and spare parts on island can be very difficult, and overseas repairs can be costly and slow. Born digital records are sort of outside of my area, but from what I observe, I have concerns that very few places have the infrastructure to receive transfers of digital archives, and that the preservation of the digital files themselves is really another new challenge to contend with. So what do I think needs to change? Essentially, I think in the Pacific and in donor partner countries, we need to respect the role of documentary heritage in culture and governance, and respect the roles of archivists and librarians. I am heartened by some really positive changes in this area more recently. I think donors and partners need to be willing to assist with increased long-term support for physical and digital infrastructure. When I say long-term, I'm talking about 10 years. A lot of projects run for 1 year, 3 years, and then there's no ongoing support. So I would strongly advocate for 10 years or thereabouts. The introduction of tertiary level archives training in the region, or more support to enroll students out of the region. More ongoing professional development. In my experience, people are really hungry for training. Everywhere I visit, people ask for training. So just to conclude, I think that more people and organizations need to engage in constructive ways in the Pacific. I would particularly encourage those with Pacific neighbors or colonial or other historical ties to consider improving your engagement with the Pacific. You might be surprised to learn about shared histories, and I think it can be a really excellent opportunity to learn from each other. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. James, for your candid evaluation of the activities and the ongoing needs for your institution. I think it was a presentation that reminds many points that were mentioned in the speech by our editor-in-chief earlier in this meeting. And actually, just like a microcosm of the concerns and challenges of the documentary heritage-related activities. Thank you very much again for your presentation. Next, last but not the least, I'd like to invite Dr. Junsu from International Center of Documentary Heritage to present a paper which is quite different from those two preceding presentations, because this is just about modern times. We are not talking about rear view mirror now. We are talking about front window from a car. Dr. Seo, please.
Distinguished colleagues and experts, good morning, afternoon, and evening. My name is Junsu Seo, representing the International Center for Documentary Heritage, ICDH, a UNESCO Category 2 center established in 2020. Our mission supports UNESCO's Memory of the World program by focusing on the preservation, accessibility, and awareness of documentary heritage. From South Korea, where it is currently in the evening, I extend a warm welcome and express my sincere gratitude for your interest and participation in the inaugural launch of the IJODH. As the initiator and current lead of this project, I am honored by this successful beginning and look forward to a collaborative journey of cultural exploration and interdisciplinary learning. Today, I will briefly present my work titled Documentary Heritage to Inspire Content Development, Game Jam Cases of Waffle and Amundsen. The UNESCO Memory of the World programs core objectives include to increase awareness worldwide of the existence and significance of documentary heritage, and thereby foster dialogue and mutual understanding between people and cultures. To enhance public awareness, various approaches have been suggested. With the growing number of documentary heritage items inscribed on the Memory of the World Register, we have a rich resource to broaden our outreach. However, a key question remains. While documentary heritage holds inherent interest, can it also be engaging and entertaining for a wider audience? This question led me to explore existing efforts to make our work more accessible and enjoyable, especially through the medium of video games. Video games can enjoy immense global popularity. Notably, East Asian countries exhibit unique social phenomena around gaming. These include strong online communities, distinct gaming structures, and even real-life interactions stemming from virtual worlds, such as purchasing in-game items with real money, offline gatherings, and even marriages. Traditionally, however, video games have often been viewed negatively in Southeast Asian societies. In South Korea, PC방, or internet cafe, or we can call PC rooms, are popular social hubs for younger generations. These establishments have evolved significantly, now offering extensive food and drink menus ordered via computer and prepared like in a restaurant, as you can see the image on the right. And countries like China and South Korea, where video games are deeply integrated into youth culture, have implemented regulations to manage play time. South Korea restricts those under 19 from PC rooms between 10 p.m. and 9 a.m. And China has even stricter rules prohibiting those under 18 from entering internet cafes and requiring ID checks to prevent access for individuals with criminal records. And despite these regulations, the inherent appeal of games is still undeniable. Rather than dismissing them, we can explore their potential benefits. Various games can offer immersive experiences by integrating diverse disciplines such as science, art, literature, philosophy, and religion. Beyond mere entertainment, they can exert a psychological influence, shaping emotions and perceptions, potentially making players more receptive to new perspectives and information. So this context gave rise to the concept of serious games, coined by Clark Abt in 1977 and gaining prominence through initiatives like the 2002 Serious Games Initiative and 2004 Serious Game Summit. Serious games are now actively supported by various nations. A prime example is the U.S. Department of Defense's America's Army, demonstrating the effectiveness of games in military training and recruitment. And similarly, the nonprofit organization Hope Labs Remission, a free cancer treatment for game for children, illustrates the potential of game development in healthcare. So this game allows players to control nanobot fighting cancer and infections within the game body, human body. An impressive 200,000 copies have been distributed free of charge across the 81 countries. And Serious Games report projects a significant surge from $9 billion in 2023 to $25 billion by 2028. This rapid growth is fueled by the integration of AI, VR, and AR, alongside the increasing demand across the sectors like education, healthcare, corporate training, military applications, and employee engagement. A prominent example is Minecraft, with 120 million players now utilized as an educational tool in classrooms. UNESCO's cultural heritage programs are increasingly recognizing serious game development as a valuable tool for heritage safeguarding. In intangible cultural heritage, game development is used to deepen understanding of cultural traditions and values, thereby supporting preservation efforts. Currently, game development leveraging UNESCO's cultural heritage primarily focuses on intangible heritage because of its inherent qualities, such as dance, craftsmanship, music, and art, which lend themselves well to educational content. This leads to my central question. What is the potential of documentary heritage in game development, and how can we overcome the dual challenge of creating games that are both entertaining and educational? So this study investigates how documentary heritage can inspire game development, especially examining how narratives from documentary heritage contribute to storytelling, a crucial element in game design. This research stems from a joint project between ICDH and the Korea Creative Content Agency on youth game gems in 2022 and 2023. In 2022, this Game Jam event targeted 100 high school students aged 17 to 19 with an interest in game development. This storytelling for the games was based on the documentary heritage items inscribed on UNESCO's Memory of the World International Register. The Game Jam resulted in the creation of 14 games inspired by documentary heritage, including themes from Shakespeare, the Suez Canal, and the Wizard of Oz. And the grand prize winner in 2022 was the game What Fo, inspired by Thailand's documentary heritage, the epigraphic archives of Wat Pho. Wat Pho, a top-tier royal temple and now a World Heritage Site, is renowned for its extensive collection of Buddha images, including the massive reclining Buddha. This popular tourist destination attracts millions of visitors. The documentary heritage expressed through drawings, paintings, and sculptures encompasses a wide range of knowledge from global exchanges covering both religious and secular subjects. So Wat Pho is considered as one of Thailand's oldest educational institutions, where the knowledge of Thai massage, rooted in traditional medicine, began to be disseminated, a practice now also recognized as UNESCO's intangible cultural heritage. Wat Pho features inscriptions on diverse subjects. These include the temple's construction and restoration history, Buddhist images in scriptures, literature, and tributary relations with ethnic groups, moral teachings, customs, and text on medicine and massage. So this content holds a significant value as a memory of the world because of its role in knowledge dissemination through public display, its contribution to the universal understanding of health and medical information, and it's a reflection of international trade and exchanges of that era. So let me now describe some aspects of this game development. The game incorporates the historical backdrop of Thailand's turbulent years marked by colonial expansion and wars with Burma. So Waffle is depicted as a central point in the conflict with outsiders, representing the transformation of this battlefield into a land of prosperity. So on the right side, you can see the image of the play that I actually did. The next one, the annual Game Jam event also continued in August 2023. The event resulted now in 12 diverse games based on the storytelling potential of documentary heritage, including themes from Alma Salik wa Alma Malik from Iran, and Jinnah Papers from Pakistan, and the Nelson Mandela case from South Africa. In 2023, the grand prize was awarded to the game Amundsen, inspired by the Roald Amundsen's South Pole expedition. So the team developed this game based on their understanding of documentary heritage's significance, identifying 3 key aspects from a contemporary perspective. The preservation of the original record of the first South Pole expedition, the existence of rare film capturing the expedition, and the I'm sorry, and the film's unique status as the only surviving moving image record of this historical event. The game is set in an adventure context where the player embodies a protagonist that focused on exploration and problem solving. So in a snowy winter landscape, Amundsen and his team, distinguished by different jacket colors, progressed by observing, jumping, riding a sled, and warming themselves by the fire. So this game features 4 stages with real images of the documentary heritage revealed upon the completion of each stage. Each stage actually represents a collection of expedition films footage. So as you can see in the image on the right, completing each stage unlocks a real image from the film. So for your better understanding, I will now share a video of my attempt to play this game. Please understand that it is exceptionally challenging and difficult. So despite my hours of play, I couldn't progress beyond the initial stages. Let's watch. Okay, so this game jam experience revealed both the potential and the challenges. A significant hurdle was the participants' initial lack of familiarity with the Memory of the World program. So, and furthermore, general information about documentary heritage proved insufficient with language barriers and difficulties in grasping the significance of the heritage. So to address this challenge, ICDH provided essential details about documentary heritages and the MOW program. We helped the developers create a compelling narratives and backgrounds for their games, and this intervention was beneficial and enabling developers to produce impactful experiences within the limited time frame. But the question remained. I briefly just mentioned with the interviews with these developers. They just suggested a primary focus on entertainment with less attention paid to historical accuracy or educational value. So while documentary heritage and educational elements can enrich games, but excessive emphasis could hinder developers in crafting truly original experiences. So compelling narratives can significantly enhance a game's value. Rich background stories and engaging plots can deeply immerse players. Through immersive gameplay, players encounter and learn about diverse cultures, religions, philosophies, and languages. So in this way, documentary heritage games offer a dual benefit. They provide engaging experiences and function as educational tools, promoting cultural appreciation with historical knowledge. Documentary heritage games possess immense potential, but several obstacles still exist. Firstly, accessibility is a key concern. Game development often thrives in specific countries with established infrastructure, including widespread computer use, reliable internet access, and dedicated platforms. Secondly, even within established game development hubs, cultural heritage themes still can be overlooked. South Korea, for example, has a robust academic system for game development, but many younger generations, aspiring developers, they prioritize practical experience over formal education. But there's a lack of accessibility to these experiential benefits. Thirdly, public awareness remains a significant barrier. This is because many individuals are simply unaware of the story included in the potentially inherent in documentary heritage. So documentary heritage still encompasses a wealth of diverse cultural assets across time and space, representing a treasure trove waiting to be explored. And documentary heritage holds the potential to create a virtual worlds, pushing the boundaries of what is possible in those worlds. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Saw, for your interesting presentation. I didn't know whether, well, some game developers were actually trying to utilize the documentary heritage in practice. Well, that was the end of the presentation, and we still have about 10 minutes or a little more if I combine the minutes allocated for me for closing remarks to the discussion. Then I think we have about 15 or so minutes of brief discussions about the papers that were presented here. So I'd like to invite any comment or questions from the floor. Please speak freely to any of the speakers today. The problem is who will start. Huh?
Well, let me start then. Just
Okay.
to ask you, Leerssen, if he ever thought of including computer games as an element in the canonization. We have seen canons in literature, of course, in statues, street names, on banknotes, etc. But did you think of the canons, the elements of the canon being represented in computer games? It was completely new to me.
It was completely new to me as well. This was a real eye-opener of a presentation, and I really, really enjoyed it. At the same time, I was struck by the fact that for such a very new type of interactive cultural practice, which is really, breaking the relationship, the active participation of people who play the game. It's not the passive reading of a book or the watching of a movie. And you have this new type of poetics about more levels and how far you get on into this quest. So there's a very specific new type of genre. What we get as topics are, in a way, canonical things like Amundsen, or and things. Wow, how come they thought of that particular one? So this, in a way, confirms from a very unexpected quarter a theory of canonicity that has been doing the rounds for a few years now, namely that if things are in a canon, say a famous book or a famous historical story or a famous memory, its canonical presence is demonstrated by the fact that it is remediated, that it moves from one medium to another, and that as soon as new media become available, the new media will first of all be used to tell once again the story that we already know. So we have new media for old memories. And that, in a way, is also a way for old memories to survive. Marx said that history happens twice, first as a tragedy, then as a farce. Now we can say that history happens 3 times, first history, then farce, and then as a musical. Everything is being turned into a musical these days. And if you look at the topics that are selected for that. I'd say certainly computer games are themselves indicators of canonicity. I think that their pedagogical use, the serious game, I mean, it can be pernicious if you use it for military training, but the idea that it can be actually an educational tool is extremely interesting. I think this is really a heartening topic. On the other hand, it strikes me that they themselves, as a cultural artifact, as a medium, are very hard to treat as heritage. They obsolesce very fast. I mean, I am from the day that we worked with 5.25-inch floppies, and the computer games I used to play are Stone Age. And sometimes Super Mario Brothers is revived, but there's a very large turnover and a developing technology. So again, we see that these memories surf from one wave to another, and as new generations of games come online or new technologies, possibly we will see new reworkings of these things. But how you keep a record that this was actually a thing in the 2020s will be very hard to, as with most digital heritage, a challenge for the future. So thanks for your question, Jan. If I could turn one over to Kari, I was very intrigued by also the problem of the challenges of precarious heritage, if we can call it that. I've very much felt your call or your comment that there's a great need for properly trained archival personnel. We have the same problem with the obsolescence of medieval expertise. We have no people left in the archives who can do paleography, who can read medieval manuscripts. So it's a different type of precariousness, but it's not wholly unrelated. And we know certainly, institutionally, these things are threatened. in Holland, there is an increasing reliance on citizen science, and we're working out very interesting ways of actually involving the users and those interested in the heritage in the curating of it. And I was wondering if this is something that is, you know, a way forward, perhaps in the Pacific part of the world.
That's a really good question. I don't know. Sorry, you've thrown me a bit of a curveball there, because I think in terms of materials that have been digitized, that have been put online, photos from our collection that get shared, a lot of shared on social platforms, a lot of metadata gets added to that, which is useful for us, and helps with discoverability as well. But in terms of training people in the islands to do this work, I don't know how you would crowdsource that, or don't know how you would use sort of citizen archivists for that. But I think there's a lot that citizens can do in terms of just building connections with people at conferences, going and listening to them present, talking to them, offering help, that sort of thing. So I think individuals can do things to help, but I think it has to be sort of built through in-person relationships. Yeah.
Thank you for
that's given me lots to think
just
about.
more. Go ahead. Go ahead, please. You finished? Okay. Okay, thank you very much for the discussion. And any other questions or comments from floor? Any more question, please? Professor Haga, would you like to have any question or comment on the presentations?
About the Pacific Manuscript Bureau, how can we access to the data? I remember once I had to go to Canberra to the library to have an access. That was the question.
Yep. So we are fully funded by subscription fees and in-kind support from the Australian National University. So access to our microfilm collection, which is still probably about 80–85% of our collection. Yes, you have to visit one of our member libraries. They have different sort of quantities of the collection depending on when they joined. So you would have to see our complete microfilm collection, you would have to go to one of our 5 founding members, as you did in Canberra. To access a digital collection, anyone can view the metadata, anyone can view the photos, but yes, to access the digitized materials, the full text digitized documents, you have to have an affiliation with one of our member libraries or approach us directly for a copy, and there may be a cost recovery processing fee for that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Then I like to ask the last question to Junsu. How do you define authenticity? Authenticity.
Oh, that's your question?
Yeah, how do you define it in your case? I mean,
are you asking this question from the based on my paper? Oh, it's a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, because the video game, it has been changed, and which media you define as original one? The program lines itself, or the media, USB, or I don't know, the documented heritage.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
In the video game program, how do you define authenticity? which one is the original?
Okay. Maybe the final product of the development.
But which one is the final one? I don't get it.
In this case, the developers had different roles, putting the music and some kind of complicated structures, and they are putting all these things together. And after that, they officially submit this final product to the institution, so that it's going to be officially announce it as a product to game. So we see that's the original copy.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So, but that is in which kind of form? It's program itself, or
it depends on where and how you create it. But in our game jam case, that's is a computer file.
Computer file.
Yes.
Yeah, and it comes usually with version number.
Yes, yeah.
So you can trace the chronological sequence of each version from a version to another. So, well, actually, if you talk about the authenticity of a video game, I think you need to make an access to source code first, and the architecture of the program. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the floor, please? Looks like time is almost up, and I'd like to conclude today's meeting. Yes, please. Papa, please.
Thank you, Professor Suo. I would like, I have no comments, but I have to take opportunity of this meeting to tell some words to my African colleagues who are attending this meeting, to ask them kindly to do, to make possible that there is African presence to the next issues of the journal, because it is important. We have rich documentary heritage in the continent. When you look at the international register, you can see it. And I think that we also face challenges, a lot of challenges in Africa we can share with the international community. So I encourage my African colleagues to do possible to make possible the presence of Africa in the next issues of the journal. Thank you very much.
Do you have any suggestion for encouraging African colleagues to make access to this journal?
No, I think that we share the information about the journal, and everybody has to share with his network to encourage colleagues to make articles for the journal. Okay. And I hope that this message will be heard kindly by my African colleagues.
Okay, thank you. Well, actually, we do not know how the information is being circulated among the colleagues in African region. So if you have any chance to transmit the news about this journal and new articles published in them, then please activate your network to disseminate the information as much as possible. I think that's pretty important mission for every participant of mole-related community. Well, finally, I would like to invite any question or comment at the last minute now. Okay. Now let me close this meeting with a tradition of rhetorics almost canonized among the presiders of any event in East Asian countries. Let me close the meeting by hoping endless development and prosperity of this activity. This is a kind of canon of rhetorics in East Asian countries. I think, Mr. Haga, you would agree. And also, I'd like to invite everybody here to pay attention to the next issue of the International Journal of the Documentary Heritage, for which the editorial committee is now working very hard. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a very pleasant day or comfortable night, depending on where you are. And I hope we can meet again in the next occasion very soon. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.